This is the grids lecture for the grids and modularity section in the ART 159 graphic design layout course. Referring back to some of the previous lectures, we've already started to explore what the grid is and how we use that within layout. And we're going to expand on that and tie this into modularity here a little bit further as well. The first example here shows this outdoor table that is constructed within this very long tabletop, these individual chairs, and these two longer benches that sit in the back. And this idea of a sort of grid and modularity is not only used in print design and web design, as we discussed. This can also be used in all sorts of applications in our everyday life, and we can see that being used here. This is a table that is intended to all fit together to hide the different chairs and benches, and the widths and the lengths of these are all fitting within this sort of modular system that we can see. Now, modularity and grids tie in together because typically when we have some sort of grid structure, we're going to be utilizing these sort of modules within that sort of modular grid. Now, when we have a modular grid, we're going to have different modules, and in order to have these different modules, we need to have columns and rows that are separated by these gutters. When we do that, we can create individual modules that we can then group together to create these larger spatial zones. So a grid is going to be composed of a series of these intersecting vertical and horizontal lines, as we discussed previously. Now, just to review some of the anatomy of a layout and of a grid, we have a simple page here that has a margin on the outside that is void of any information, and that is going to contain what we refer to as the live area, where all of your information is going to sit. Within the actual live area, you have your columns that run vertically within the space. You have your rows, which run horizontally, and those are separated by gutters, both vertically and horizontally, and create modules, which are those individual squares within the grid structure. And when we start to group these modules together, we see these larger spatial zones that we can also utilize within our designs. And we can see this use of a modular grid being used in a variety of different layouts. This is a great example here where we can see a variety of images that are all fitting within this modular grid. And then that is being echoed over here on the page 1 that is using 2 of the columns to house the text box here, and then the third column to house the sort of caption of text that we can see. Then on the additional spread over here from the same magazine, they're utilizing a full page bleed here on the left, and again utilizing 2 columns with white space here in the third column. Now, the beauty of these modular grids is when you have individual modules, again, you can group them together, you can separate them. As long as you are leaving the gutters, that are void of any information, it is easy to decipher this information. And really, there's a lot of possibilities that you can use within a modular grid as long as you're fitting those within the individual modules and the live area presented. Now, if you've ever gone to a website on your phone and then looked at that website on your desktop or a tablet, you might have noticed that the layout, the grid structure, and the modularity of that website is changing in each one of those formats. And that's referred to as an adaptive grid. And this generates templates which are optimized and are going to be unique for each of the device classes, whether it is a desktop, tablet, or phone. Because as we know, we have different sizes that we can use, and we also have different ways that we use these, generally scrolling from top to bottom, but a very vertical format compared to a very horizontal format between the desktop and the phone, which is going to limit us as far as how much is able to be seen in a phone display versus a desktop display. So an adaptive layout takes all of those modular elements and reorganizes them depending on what device you're using. And that is not something that you have to do necessarily. It is something that you structure within the website to automatically adapt. A responsive website is going to be a universal design which reflows across different displays. So essentially it is going to be not reorganizing the module so much as reflowing what is seen across the displays. Now, as we can see here, this responsive display shows how you can take a single vertical format here and move that into additional modules that could be used within different formats, whether it may be your phone or your tablet or your desktop. So depending on the size that you're using and the adaptive quality of that, you want to make sure that you're considering how this modular system is going to work within the particular format that you're exploring. And modular grids are very popular. We see this in a lot of different applications that we use, whether it's some sort of dashboard potentially that we're using with an application or a program that divides the different areas up into the important information and shares this sense of alignment within the modular grid that is being used. Or something like we can see over here on Pinterest, which is a modular grid depending on the size of those particular images. It's still using modularity, but the different heights of these are showing different heights within the different images that you can see. So modular content blocks can be used to build basic or more complex pages like we just saw. Basic would be a very simple modular system that is strictly sticking within this simple columns and rows that we can see. Sophisticated starts to pull more information in and out of that modular system, and complex takes that a bit further as well. For the purpose of this class, we're really going to be focusing on basic modular systems and structures. But the other thing to take into account as you start to work on your layouts is the importance of white space. Oftentimes, this is overlooked as a young designer. The importance of white space to draw emphasis and to let your eyes rest as a viewer. Now, this is the same information on both of these pages, and you can see how on the left they're really utilizing every single nook and cranny of this page to fit this information within the space with a lot of overlap, a lot of varying sizing, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to follow within the space and know where to look first, second, and third due to the use of the hierarchy. Over on the right, we have a much more effective layout, which is using this modular grid and structure and is using white space to let us know where to look first, second, and third, and allowing your eyes to travel through the design using that white space and letting your eyes rest within the space as well. A lot of high-end brands will utilize white space to convey the sort of higher end scale that they are trying to achieve as well, and this also does this has an advantage by putting the emphasis on the actual product within the space as well. Now, oftentimes you'll see this use of a modular grid even within sketches. You can see that these sketches are all using a modular grid structure, and even though they are just using lines to represent text and boxes to represent images, we can clearly see that there are multiple columns and rows within this space and a sense of alignment that's happening here within these different modules that are creating these different spatial zones within the work as well. So for the Grids and Modularity Part 2 assignment, you will use a different template actually that is available for you in the module, and it will be the Grids and Modularity Part 2 template. And you will be working with grayscale boxes and text boxes with placeholder text to simulate these layouts both with text and image. So it will be the same modular grid that you used in part 1 of these 9 different modules. And depending on the layout that you're working on, you're going to be working on 10 compositions in total. You're going to be placing placeholder boxes for where images would sit and placeholder content for where your text would sit as well. And this gives us an idea of how we can use a modular grid to create different spatial zones and create a variety of layouts within the same grid structure. One thing to remember within this practice is to not be afraid of white space and to utilize white space within multiple options that you have of your different layouts. If you have any questions, please refer to the tutorial and the assignment sheet that is available on the Canvas site. And also make sure as you are working on this assignment that you are clearly utilizing the grid that is provided. that you are using a full module, and if it is expanding into an additional module, that it's not covering up the gutter. Your images and your text should always sit perfectly within those modules, and unless it's going through that gutter and all the way into the next module, you want to cut that image or that text short to make sure that it stops before your gutter. So you can see that this would be incorrect up here at the top. At the bottom, this is spanning through all three modules and it's covering up those gutters, so that's fine. If it's going to go through here, it should go all the way into the next module. The other thing is make sure that you are filling the module completely. I do not want to see any half sort of fills within these modules that is breaking that structure. It needs to be a full square within that structure. So please refer to the assignment sheet and the tutorial on Canvas, and as always, reach out if you have any questions.